So, for example, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it will mostly lead to an economic crisis. But in a lot of poorer countries, it's not the economic crisis that is the strongest, but the food crisis that will lead. So the FAO is already warning on the humanitarian crisis that we'll have in some country after the pandemic. So we'll be working on that.
Hello, and welcome again to the Pathways podcast, where we explore different careers in the Quebec City region. I'm your host, Susanna Tang, from Voice of English-Speaking Quebec. Today, I'll be speaking with Rachel Levesque about her career in international relations. Rachel completed her master's degree in 2016 and has been working for the government of Quebec for 4 years. We started off by asking Rachel what inspired her to work in international relations.
As long as I remember, I was always very curious and very passionate by food security. And food security is when everyone has an equal access to affordable, nutritious, healthy food. I was very concerned by the fact that it was not all people on earth, and even in Canada and even in Quebec, have access to food that would go to bed hungry. I did also a lot of volunteering when I was younger at Action Against Hunger Canada, for example, or the Food Secure Canada. So it was more Canadian organization. So they're primarily English-speaking organization, but they wanted to make sure that they had Francophone content as well. So one of the first job I did in both organizations was a lot of translation. But I was also very interested in international relations. And I think it's because I had an international background. I lived in France, in Belgium, and in Vancouver. And so I was very aware of all of the international cultural difference, and it was very interesting for me.
Next, I asked her to describe her job in her own words.
So I am an international relations advisor for the Ministry of International Relations and La Francophonie at the government of Quebec. So more precisely, I work within the International Organization and Forum divisions that coordinate Quebec's relation with international organizations such as the UN, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, for example. And personally, I'm responsible for the relation Quebec has with the United Nations Organization for Food and Agriculture, which is the FAO, and the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, which is basically the convention that is responsible for nature. We ensure the defense and the promotion of Quebec's interests. And all of that we do, our actions, our policy, our expertise within this international organization. So we make sure that Quebec is really well put at the international scene.
Okay, so what are some tasks or activities that you do in your job on a regular basis?
I think it's a very difficult question for my job because my job requires me to be able to work on a lot of different things. So currently, I'm supervising an international cooperation project that Quebec have with FAO in food security in Senegal and Haiti. So it's how can we make sure that the impact of climate change does not mean that people will go food insecure. So what we've did with FAO, we thought of, the objective, the activities, and the outcome of the project to make sure that the project will indeed at the end improve the food security in both countries. And so now the project is well in place, and I'm working with all of the partners of the project in the government of Senegal and Haiti to make sure that the project is going well. If there is a problem, we'll try to address it. We do activities and so on. And for example, with the COVID-19 crisis, now I'm working a lot on analyzing the future of international relations. And we work with the United Nations to make sure that can help prevent the future epidemic. We make sure that we have a green recovery. And so I help with my expertise on sustainable food systems, for example, and I'll follow what FAO will be recommending so I can influence the government of Quebec decision on those subjects.
So would you say that you have to produce a lot of research type reports? Is that what it is? Is it mostly for political leaders? Who gets to read these? communities.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Usually what we do is we follow the negotiation, we follow the forum, we attend the meeting. And so we do brief or analysis and we transform them into recommendations for our government to take. And sometimes we are directly asked by the government to provide a recommendation on, for example, food autonomy. So that's one thing we've been working on lately.
Does your work involve a lot of travel?
Yes, we're traveling a few times a year to attend the meetings. As I mentioned earlier, I'm also responsible of everything that comes to nature and biodiversity. And what I do is that I will attend the international meeting and we can do a lot of networking, informal discussion, and networking is a very important part of the job because you have the formal negotiation, but a lot is happening behind the scene when you talk with and you create alliance. And I make sure that Quebec's priorities and interests are well represented. And I make sure that the goals that are being negotiated, Quebec will be able to implement them since in Quebec, environment is a provincial responsibility. So, for example, the convention will adopt a new agreement on nature next year, and it will be a bit similar to the Paris Agreement we have in climate. So it will be a similar agreement, but for nature.
What would you say is the most interesting thing you do at work?
Aside the fact I get to work, in the field that I'm very passionate about, I think that being able to travel everywhere to represent your government at the United Nations, I think it's a perk that you have in your job. For example, last year, before the crisis, I've been to Germany, to Kenya, to Italy. I was also at the United Nations in New York to attend those international meetings and represent Quebec. So it's very good to be, you're really at the heart of the action. You're really part of the discussion. Entering the United Nations in New York for the first time, to work and not just, as a tourist. It's a feeling that, you always get it. I don't think you can ever be used to that type of privilege you have when you do that for a living.
And now the reverse. What's the most difficult thing you do at work?
You have to be able to perform under stress and pressure. I think that negotiations sometimes it can be very tense since you have to make sure you arrive at a common agreement, even though you have sometimes very different opinion at the beginning. So the hours can be very long. Sometimes we can be in plenaries for almost, all days and very late in the night because you have to reach that agreement at the end. If not, it's a failure, and usually we don't want to. We want to have a successful negotiation, and I think that you have to be able to have a lot of responsibility since usually you are the sole representative of your government. You have to be by yourself. For example, one time I was in negotiation, but I was in Egypt and it was still night in Quebec. And I had a very big question, but I could not ask my supervisor because it was maybe 3 a.m. in the night in Quebec. So you have to trust yourself and be sure you respect, the guideline, but you have to make the decision on your own. It's a lot of pressure, but at the same time, it's very, great in the end to be able to represent your government by yourself.
So I'm thinking of a career in international relations. What are some qualities I should have?
If you have an interest to work in international relations at the government, I think that you have to love communications. You have a lot of interaction with, foreign colleagues, diplomats. You get to meet a lot of leaders of other countries, of other organizations. As I was saying, it takes sometimes a lot of discussion to attain your goal in diplomacy. So I think that you have to be good at it. And I think you have to have a lot of flexibility and ability to compromise to make sure it's, it's always positive and you don't damage relationships, you don't create any incidents. You have to be open to other cultural perspective. We don't work the same depending of where we live. Sometimes you have to take a different approach if you're talking with a country or another. And I think that you have to have that mix of, great teamwork, because when you work in civil services, teamwork is very important and you're always working in teams, but also autonomy, since, as I was saying, sometimes you get to be the sole representative of your government. And I really do think that you need to be proud to represent your government, since you will be a government representative. And sometimes that means that you have to put some personal opinion aside. You have to make sure that what you're saying is, it's in line with your government priorities.
Is there any way for students to develop those skills, especially the skills of negotiation?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the greatest experience I had is the simulation of United Nations I did at university. And I think it's something that it's very accessible. Every university offers that type of UN simulation. And I mean, I remember when you first start, you get this huge book of, it's negotiation 101 or something like that. And then you practice, during the whole year how to negotiate and so on. And I think that it's a very good skill to learn while you're studying. If not, I mean, I guess it's something also you can learn by doing. I think that when I started in international relations, I was not as diplomatic as I'm trying my best to be. So I think that when you are in a work environment, then you learn and you get those little tips every day, and so you can improve.
How many opportunities are there to work to do the work that you do?
You have more opportunity that you think. I remember when I wanted to work in international relations, I thought it would be very hard and it would be very difficult, but I think that there's a lot of, you can work at different places. For example, I started at the Canadian government, and it's a very big department of international relations. And even at the Quebec government, it's not the biggest ministry, but still there's a lot of opportunity, and they hire a lot of interns at the end of their study to get them that first experience. And even if you want to work in the government, you don't have to work at the International Relations Ministry. Every other ministry, for example, the Ministry of Environment, have an international relations division. So if you're really passionate about environment or culture, and international relations, you can still try to have that kind of job where you can do both. So I think if you want to work in government, a lot of my colleagues, as I did, started with an internship. So I think it's a very good point of entry.
Maybe now's the time to ask, how often do you use English in your work and in what capacity?
Since I work in, international relations, I use English quite often. I have to say that I use it, I'm sure I use it every day. Every time we have international meetings, usually we all work in English. It's easier, and everyone, knows English, so it's better. The good thing is usually in negotiation, English is the second language to a lot of my colleagues. So we tend to, easily forget, grammatical errors or strong accents. So that's really good. And sometimes people even, use English, but we'll put words in other languages, and we tend to get used to it. But when you attend official meeting, there's also translation. So you're able to follow in every language you want. But when I'm working day to day, I write my emails in English most of the time. But the important thing in the government of Quebec is if you're able to speak French, then you have to, you tend to favorize French, since we're a Francophone province. So usually if I can, I'll try to speak French, but I don't mind at all switching to English if it's that's easier.
Let's get to our last question. So what advice do you have for high school students?
When I was in high school, I think that it's normal. It's normal if you don't know yet, what you want to do. I didn't at the time. And I think it's very okay if you change your mind. And what I did is I took a break to think. I left for Vancouver because I said, I want to work in international relations. So I'll improve my English. So I did that. I did this experience. And I think I came back with, a clearer mind. And I don't know if I'll have the same job my entire life as well. You can change as well. So I don't think you have to put that much pressure. But if I had to give one advice that really worked well with me, is that if you know what really drives you, what is a passion or really something that you want to improve in the world, and having a job that helps you in that way is really good, because in that sense you don't get the sense that you're working, but more that you're trying to improve the world or doing something that really drives you. So I think that for me it really worked to find something that was aligning with my values and what I wanted to do.
And that's all for this episode. Thank you again to our guest, Rachel Levesque, for sharing her insights. We would also like to acknowledge the Government of Canada for funding this initiative. Join us next time for our talk with Jan Becker about his work as a PhD candidate in biomedical research. This is the Pathways Podcast. Signing off, until next time.